afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Free-for-All Friday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is May 4th, and may the 4th be with you. 2000, year of our Lord 2018. Remember, we're a hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He loves you. And we do what we do here at the Dan Clements Show, knowing the fear of the Lord, we persuade folks. And I'm broadcasting live today from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful Central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. I haven't given these out in quite a while, but remember, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on, of course, I'm on YouTube because you're watching me on YouTube. And I have an Instagram account which isn't very active. I'm trying to get that going. It's hard to keep everything going. I'm on Patreon. If you want to support the show, I have a Patreon account. You can donate over there, become a patron of the show, or if you rather set up something on a monthly basis with PayPal, I have links to my PayPal. They'll all be in the show notes page over at the danclementshow.com, and they'll also be in the description below, especially the Patreon and the PayPal. Apologize for the mustache. It got a little wildly on me today, and I didn't have a chance to grease her down, so it's going to look a little fuzzy on the one side. I'm sorry for that. Now, today we're going to talk about immigration. We're going to talk about immigration and crime. We're going to talk about I call it a criminal caravan at our southern border over in California. We're going to talk about the illegal immigrant caravan and their demands that they're trying to place on the United States government. But basically, we're going to talk about the immigrant caravan and crime among illegal immigrants. And I got in a good discussion last night with a libertarian acquaintance of mine on Facebook. Now, he's of the mind that the U.S. Constitution does not authorize the federal government to do anything with immigration laws, but he can't explain to me what the naturalization part of the enumerated powers. I said, in order to naturalize somebody, you have to define what a citizen is, and in order to define what a citizen is, you have to define your borders. If you're living on this side of the border, you're not a citizen. If you're living on the other side, you're a citizen. And he just doesn't see it that way. I'd say a lot of libertarians don't see it that way. But I don't see how reasonably and logically you could see it any other way. Especially when like I said, we have an enumerated power, talks about the naturalization of citizens. And to me, that's, I think that's all the further the founding fathers had to take it, because they knew eventually things would change here and there. We don't have a huge illegal immigration population coming from Canada. We do from the southern states, from Mexico, from Central Latin America and South America. And what really makes me mad is Mexico allowed this caravan to cross their southern border. But they wouldn't allow them to stay. They wouldn't allow them to seek asylum there, political or other, economic asylum or anything. And they wouldn't allow them to do anything else. And I forgot to shut my cell phone off real quick. And so they wanted them to pass through without incident up here to the United States. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And Mexico, they're doing this on purpose. They didn't want these people. They don't want a lot of their own people because they don't want to have to deal with complaints from their own citizens. And I know there's arguments for and against the border wall. I'm totally for setting up a border wall and getting that done. I'm all for that. To tighten up our borders and to allow those that are legally seeking, migration or immigration to the United States, to allow them to pursue that and quit allowing these illegal immigrants to take up slots or potential slots that these legal immigrants that wait for years it goes through the natural process to get here to the United States. So we have a lot to talk about today here in this, so I'm not going to have a real long monologue because I want to try to get most everything I've gotten down here about what's going on. And I really want to dive into not so much the caravan, but I really want to get into some of these studies and articles that were shared with me on Facebook about crime and illegal immigrants. And it's kind of funny, and I'll talk about it when we get down there. It's kind of funny that there's a whole class of crimes that libertarians and progressives social democrats, want to forget about or just put off the side. Well, that's a victimless crime. Well, it depends on the victim, I guess. And I'm not one to talk about victimhood or have people want people in a victim state or victimhood state. However, there are victims in this. There are victims in this, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get down there. Today's daily Bible reading comes from 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. Very straightforward. And he's talking to Christians here. And in a sense, he's talking to those that are outside the church also, because God's word is for the whole world. Now, whether you believe it or not, or whether you apply it to your life or not, it's a whole different story. But God's word is for the whole world, just like Jesus Christ sacrificed for the whole world. And he's talking about putting the world above God, putting the world above things that shouldn't be put above. And how that can be harmful to your life, and how that can be sinful towards God and towards the brethren. Today's quote meal comes from C.S. Lewis. I like C.S. Lewis, and I like a lot of his quotes that he puts forth. He said, the Christian has a great advantage over other men, not by being less fallen than they, nor less doomed to live in a fallen world, but by knowing that he is a fallen man in a fallen world. The greatest hoax that the devil has perpetrated on mankind is to make or force mankind to believe that he isn't real. And I was talking to some folks on Twitter that were very atheistic and called us, and this is, I don't want to get too far into this, but this does bother me a little bit. They call Christians every name in the book. They say we're silly for believing in the spaghetti monster in the sky or whatever they want to call God, right? And God's big enough he can handle all that criticism and that. I don't have to defend God too much that way. But when the same people, when they start trying to quote scriptures back at us to try to condemn us, it gets real funny and real surreal real quick, because they don't know what they're saying. They don't know. They rip things out of context. They try to apply Old Testament laws to the New Testament, and it just doesn't work out that way. And yet they think that they're so superior in their intellect when they espouse these things that they know nothing about. And that's what I wrote back to them. I says, I wish you folks would quit talking about things you know nothing about. Obviously, you haven't studied these things. One guy was saying, well, if Jesus is God, then Jesus is the Father, and he was praying to himself, and he just went around in circular logic. And again, there was one of those things I said, you need to go study what the triune Godhead is. And he had no clue, didn't have any understanding, yet he felt that he had enough information on his side to pontificate about those things. And it just really makes me laugh about these guys or these men and women that try to do that. I got to laugh, and I do feel sorry for them because they do not have the truth. Today's short Bible lesson comes from the Gospel of John chapter 4, verses 24. Re-examine Worship in Spirit and Truth by Wes McAdams over at radicallychristian.com. Now, he posted this on May the 2nd. Real good read there. Worship in Spirit and Truth. And this is the funny thing, when I talk to other people that say that they're atheists and don't believe in God and think that we're silly and foolish for believing in these things, if you try to talk to them about verses like this, they wouldn't have a clue to what you're talking about. Not at all. And they don't, and matter of fact, they don't even want to go over and discuss it. Because in their mind, it's just silly superstition that you're believing in, and there's no merit to it, even though there's so much evidence that God gives in his word, in creation, just about every aspect of life that points to there being a God, in my mind, they're foolish for not recognizing that there is a God. Only a fool says in his heart there is no God, the psalmist says. Because there's so much evidence that points to it. Rational, common sense evidence that points to a God. All right, let's get into some of the what we're going to talk about today. And I'm telling you what, this is it's getting strange out there, folks. Let me just put it that way. It is really getting strange out there. Now, here's an article written by Heather Ham Warren on April 6th. No border wall can stop this caravan. Now, this is over at the, let me see here. It's the Foundation, always got to write this down. The Foundation for American Immigration Reform. No border wall can stop this caravan. There is a crisis brewing at the southern border, one that even an impenetrable border wall has no chance of stopping. At this very moment, there are nearly 1,500 Central American migrants caravanning through Mexico on their way to U.S. ports of entry where they plan to claim asylum. The group leading the caravan, known as Pueblo Sin Fronteras, is flaunting their plans, disrespecting President Trump and claiming entitlement to American asylum benefits before they even arrive. But the sobering reality for immigration officials is that there is almost nothing they can do about the situation. Over time, economic migrants have learned magic words that trigger a series of actions meant to protect the most vulnerable of our neighbors. They claim asylum, then they are entitled to a credible fear hearing to determine if the alien has a credible fear of persecution in his or her home country on the basis of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. Last year, Attorney General Jeff Sessions explained the process of evaluating credible fear assertions, highlighting how absurd the situation has become. The Department of Homeland Security is tasked with evaluating whether an apprehended alien's claim of fear is credible. If DHS finds that it may be, the applicant is placed in removal proceedings and allowed to present an asylum claim to an immigration judge. If DHS finds that the alien does not have a credible fear, the alien can still get an immigration judge to review that determination. In effect, those who would otherwise be subject to expedited removal have two chances to establish that their fear is credible. The previous administration began to allow most aliens who passed an initial credible fear review to be released from custody into the United States pending a full hearing. These changes and case law that has expanded the concept of asylum will well beyond congressional intent, created even more incidents of illegal aliens to come here and claim a fear of return. Claims of fear to return have skyrocketed, and the percentage of claims are genuinely meritorious or down. Now, basically what's happening is the immigrants coming through the caravan are citing economic fear. And I remember some of the pictures they were actually showing. This one lady that they interviewed, she was claiming economic fear and, that they couldn't find jobs or couldn't find food or anything else. And not to fat shame anybody, but she made two of me, and I'm a pretty big boy. She was about twice my size. So I'm thinking, if you're citing economic woes and hunger and everything as your fear asylum case, you better go lose a few pounds. Now, this may be insensitive to say, but folks, it's ridiculous what's happening on our southern borders. It's totally ridiculous what's happening down there. Now, we have another story from the Washington Times. Caravan migrants say Donald Trump is discriminating against them. Okay, and this is a Washington Times story posted on May the 4th be with you by Stephen Dinan. Migrants who came to the U.S. as part of the illegal immigrant caravan accused President Trump of discrimination this week, saying he ordered his Justice Department to prosecute people from Central America who jumped the border while ignoring people from other countries such as India. Some of the immigrants or migrants have asked a federal judge to toss out the illegal entry charges against them, saying the unfair prosecutions undermine the Justice Department's entire case and violate the Constitution's guarantee of equal protection. Now, since I'm your constitutional warrior, let me say something about this. Violates the Constitution's guarantees of equal protection. Guess what those 14th Amendment rights, or who or whom those 14th Amendment rights are directed to? If you guessed American citizens, you got that right. You got that right. Now, I'm not saying that other people in the world do not have or should not have equal protection under the law in their own countries, but that's a country by country case. Our Constitution guarantees our citizens. It doesn't guarantee non-citizens equal protection under the law. You know, there are certain privileges that derive from being an American citizen, and that's one of them. And yeah, I am sorry that other countries do not recognize this fact that there should be equal protection under the law. But you can't, an illegal immigrant cannot use American citizens' rights and protections against us to access or gain entry to our country illegally under false pretenses. And again, I was talking to my libertarian friends on Facebook past few days about this, especially one in particular who doesn't believe the Constitution gives the federal government any authority over immigrations at all, which, again, the enumerated power talks about the naturalization of citizens. That's an enumerated power of Congress. And so they said about, setting borders, laws, and everything like that. And what's happening is, and if you don't know this, you must be living under a rock or don't even pay attention to the news. What's happening is the illegal aliens or citizens from other countries are coming here illegally. A lot of them actually fly in here on a visa and overstay their visas. That's when he talked about folks from India, such countries as India. We have a big problem with folks from India coming here on like student visas and that, and then overstaying their student visas or their visitation visas. And we're not going to collect them up and send them back to India. That's a huge problem. Okay? But even though that's a problem, it doesn't excuse what they're doing, what this caravan's doing, trying to come over our border. Doesn't excuse them whatsoever. And that's where I sort of get mad about this whole argument. Well, folks from India are doing it. Well, it doesn't make it right. You know, what moms used to say to us, if your friend jumped over the cliff, would you follow him? No. He's an idiot. Again, that has never been a defense. Well, they're doing it, we can do it. That's never, ever been a legal defense. As far as I'm concerned, now, has it been used and hasn't been successful? Yes. But I think it's an erroneous defense. And I think judges that allow that shouldn't be sitting on the bench to begin with. Okay? I'm going to read on through here. The government cannot choose whom to prosecute based on alleged national origin, but that's exactly what happened here. The government arrested a group of people who were in the precise same situation and selected only those whom it believed to be from Central America to prosecute while releasing the rest, wrote Eric S. Fish, a public defender who is challenging the cases. If he succeeds, it would be a major blow to Mr. Trump and Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who promised a get-tough approach towards the caravan, saying they wanted to send a message to other would-be illegal immigrants not to make the journey if they don't have valid claims of legal status. Now, this is the first place I've read where they're doing this selective, selecting out these folks. In my opinion, if you're part of that caravan that came through Mexico, and who knows how many people they collected up in Mexico in that caravan once before it hit the southern border, I don't care what your nation of origin is, they should all be turned back. This should be a Mexican problem. Every one of them should be turned back to Mexico, and if Mexico don't want them there, then they need to ship them back to their country of origin. It shouldn't be the United States problem at all. In one of the cases Mr. Fish is seeking to dismiss against Olga Esmeralda George stems from a Friday arrest in the area of north of the border that Border Patrol agents refer to as Goats Canyon. 18 self-admitted illegal immigrants were nabbed at the same time. 13 from Honduras, including Mrs. George, 1 from Guatemala, 1 from Mexico, and 3 from India. Only 4 of the Hondurans and the 1 Mexican were charged for illegal entry as part of the suspected caravan. Mr. Fish, in his motion have the charges tossed, said the administration is suffering from a disjointed policy. Now, I think if Mr. Fish is successful here, what should happen is everybody, including the Indians, the 3 from India, all of them should be put back across the border. He shouldn't be arguing that, oh, well, the administration let these folks in, which I think is wrong. Okay, I think it's wrong they're doing this. They shouldn't be letting anybody in. And again, if he's successful, they all should be put back across the border. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And just like when I was growing up, if me and a couple of my buddies got in trouble, we all got in trouble, whether we actually did it or not, because you know what, we were stupid enough to let them get in trouble, and we were there with them. We were guilty by association. So Miss George is guilty by association with the rest of these folks in the caravan. There was only one purpose for this caravan to come up through Mexico, and that was challenge President Trump, challenge the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, the whole 9 yards, challenge our assertion that we are a sovereign country, we have sovereign borders, and you're not going to come across our borders illegally. That's why we need a wall. Honestly, folks, we need that physical barrier on the southern border. We need to tighten that up. I'm glad that states and the federal government are sending troops and National Guardsmen to our borders. That should have been done years ago. It had never been done under the Obama administration, God forbid, if he did something that was actually right to protect this country. But President Trump is at least trying to protect our country. He's trying to do what's right. He's trying to do what's right. And yes, does our administration have a disjointed policy? Yes. Why does the Trump administration have a disjointed policy? Let me think. Could it be that maybe the Obama administration had set things up in such a way that made the policy disjointed, and President Trump is trying to work his way through it? DACA, the Dreamers Act, right? People are screaming to the rooftops. Judges and people alike, social democrats alike, screaming to the rooftops, how dare President Trump? How dare he cancel DACA? And all he did was take an executive order and say DACA is unconstitutional because the president didn't have authority to do that. Presidents do not have authority to make law, period. Only the Congress. All legislative powers are vested in the Congress. Article 1 of the Constitution, folks. So all President Trump did was throw the thing back in its rightful place in Congress. And they've got too many cowards in Congress that don't want to do the right thing. Oh, we're worried about our reelection. Instead of doing the right thing, they're more worried about the perception of doing the wrong thing. And that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. That's why we have a disjointed policy. You can't blame it on President Trump. He was handed a mess on our immigration policies. He truly was. And it's not helping that we have a bunch of social democratic judges sitting on benches, especially out in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, that has thwarted President Trump in every aspect of his immigration. Anytime he's trying to protect the United States, especially with his visa and green card applications from certain countries over the Middle East. And honestly, folks, I don't know why President Trump's tolerating it. He's a better man than I am, because I would tell them, and Andrew Jackson's not my favorite president. He's not the best president that ever lived. But when he got rid of the national banks and the Supreme Court and judges and other justices says, you can't do that, you need to reinstate it, and they handed down, verdicts of that effect, Andrew Jackson said, you enforce it then. In other words, make me. That's why I was hoping Donald Trump would tell these judges out west, especially that judge out in Hawaii. All right, you put the ruling down, you enforce it. The judicial branch in the United States government has no enforcement capabilities whatsoever. They rely on the President of the United States to enforce the laws. There again, the judiciary cannot create laws on the bench. And they've been doing that for too many years now. Too many years. Like I said, I would be 100% behind President Trump, even though I'm not a Trump supporter and didn't vote for him. I'd be 100% behind him if that's exactly what he told the judicial branch of the federal government. Okay, you made this, fine. You enforce it now. They had no enforcement tools. That's President Trump has them. Every president has enforcement tools. The judiciary doesn't. And I would love to, I would love to see the social democrats in this country's brains explode if Donald Trump did that. Do you imagine what the lamestream media would do if President Trump said you enforce these silly laws or these precedents or these dictates from the bench that you're trying to force on the country? They would be beside themselves. They would totally be beside themselves. And I think it'd be the funniest thing in the world to see. I really do. I really, really do. All right, we have another story here about this, the Caravan. And this is Thomas Homan, ICE chief, illegal immigrant caravan stealing spots from deserving refugees. Now this is again by Stefan Dinan, posted on the 1st of May of this year. The people from the illegal immigration caravan making bogus asylum claims in the U.S. are keeping others, more deserving people from war-torn and troubled countries, from getting to safety here. President Trump's top immigration enforcement official said Tuesday. Thomas D. Holman, who is leading U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, said the Trump administration will not be forced by the caravan, which is demanding its 150 or so participants be granted quick hearings to gain entry and begin their asylum claims in the U.S. We are not going to do this on their time frame, Mr. Holman said on Fox and Friends. The caravan started out about 1,500 people, mostly from Honduras, who have made their way across Mexico over the last 5 weeks and are now in Tijuana demanding entry in the U.S. But rather than jumping the border, they're waiting for appointments with Customs and Border Protection officers where they plan to make their asylum claims, which will then be heard through the usual process. Caravan organizers say the U.S. is required to let them all have appointments, and they have blasted border officials saying they are slow walking the processes. Just 8 people are allowed to make the claims Monday. Organizers said the group ended up deciding 3 women, 4 children, and one 18-year-old should go first. The others have vowed to wait out U.S. officials. By contrast, dozens of people associated with the caravan were nabbed by the Border Patrol after sneaking into the U.S., a source said. 11 of them were charged Monday with crimes for jumping the border. Most of them were given $10,000 bonds. Immigrant right activists objected to anyone in the caravan being arrested, and Senator Dianne Feinstein of California, the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, called the reports incredibly troubling, saying anyone seeking asylum has a right to be heard. The criminal prosecution of asylum seekers is for illegal entry or similar offenses calls into question whether the United States is complying with international obligations, she said in a statement. I'm going to stop the reading there. We are not bound by international obligations when it comes to protecting our borders and saying who is and who is not allowed into our country. The UN does not dictate to us how we do this. It's our Congress that sets forth the laws. The fact that Senator Dianne Feinstein is citing this is troubling in and of itself. That we have not complying with international obligations. You know what you can do with the international obligations? You can put them on a real short pier and tell them to take a long walk. They should have no bearing on how many refugees we take in, on how many illegal aliens we allow to cross the border. If we shut that border off and don't let one single illegal immigrant across the border, what does the UN or any other international body They have no jurisdiction whatsoever. Again, if they're crying about it, let them come over and enforce that. Or let them try. I am so tired of us deferring to the UN, deferring to other world orders. We have international obligations. No, we don't. And no other country in the world has international obligations like Europe. I feel sorry for some of the citizens in Europe because the Muslims have finally succeeded in conquering Europe with barely a shot or a shot fired or sword drawn. And if something happens over there, it's going to be America that's going to have to step in and take care of things again. And now there's a handful of countries over in Europe that are fighting this. Poland's one of them. Austria's another one of them. They're fighting these. They're not taking any refugees in. And they're not allowing the UN or Brussels to dictate to them how or when or why they're, on their immigration policies. And I say kudos to them. And it just makes me mad when I see sitting senators talk about our international or complying with international obligations. International obligations and a $1.70 will get you a cup of coffee here in the United States. That's about it. As far as I'm concerned, that's all they're worth. Okay? Analysts say most people are likely to have valid asylum cases. Indeed, only about 1 in 5 cases from Central American countries such as Honduras or El Salvador are successful. Again, I love how everybody wants to use the United States as a relief valve for their countries not to have to force change in their countries. What's happening down in Honduras and El Salvador is a problem and is a crime in some ways. But people escaping those countries and not standing up to their governments and not fighting for their basic human rights in those countries, I think is horrible. I think it's horrible. And it's only like Mexico, allowing all the poorest of the poor, other people escape the country so they don't have to deal with them. If they're here in the United States, they don't have to deal with them. And matter of fact, they get a huge benefit from them because a lot of the illegal immigrants that are working over here, they take a lot of their money and wire it back, Western Union it back. And we're talking billions and billions of dollars every year going back into the Mexican economy. A lot of people don't know that. It's not staying here. I've seen story after story over the years since I've been doing this since late 2007. I've read to folks stories about this. I've read stories about this. They might rent a ranch house, 3-bedroom ranch house. And I bet you that, and a lot of times there's 3 or 4 families in that one ranch house, far exceeding the occupancy of the structure. And a lot of landlords, as long as they're getting their money, they don't care. They're looking the other way. And so don't tell me that illegal immigrants aren't a drain on our system, aren't gaming our system. And don't tell me that, they're spending their money here in the United States. They're spending a little bit of their money here. Vast majority of it gets wired back to their country of origin so their family back there can have a better standard of living. It just irks me. It infuriates me, folks. Under the usual process, asylum seekers at the border would be screened, and if they claim a credible fear of being sent back home, a fairly low bar that the immigrants must have been instructed on how to meet, they will then be given a future date with an immigration judge who will rule in the case. Now, in my opinion, if they're seeking asylum here, they should not be allowed into our country until that case is heard. They need to stay wherever they're at, like in Tijuana, until they have a hearing date and that case is heard. I don't know why they need to be let here in the United States just because they have an asylum hearing. And again, that's a very low bar, because a lot of these folks that are being interviewed before they get to the Border Patrol, they're telling reporters and stuff like that foolishly, but they're still telling them that they're seeking asylum for economic fears. Again, not enough jobs, not enough food, and you look at some of the people, they're healthy. They got good body weight. Matter of fact, some of them got some good body fat counts for being economically depressed. And it just, again, it irks me how these people use the system. Now, getting back to what actually sparked this during this week was this discussion I was having with my libertarian friend about illegal immigration does not increase violent crime, 4 studies show. Now, this is an NPR.org article here. Let me get back up here. Posted on the 2nd of May this year by John Burnett. And I guess most of this came off a Twitter feed. But he's talking about these 4 studies that they're talking about. Now, I'm just going to cite the studies. You'll see, if you go to the show notes page, danclementshow.com, it'll be in the show notes of this episode. And if you're tracking episodes here, it's episode 980. This is also a podcast episode that'll be put out after the show. It's episode 980. Okay? And these links will be down below there. There's one by Michael T. Light posted on March 25th of this year. Does undocumented immigration increase violent crime? There's another one by Michael T. Light. He's a PhD, same guy that wrote the last one. Ty Miller, master's degree, and Brian C. Kelly's a PhD, posted on July 20th of last year, 2017. Undocumented immigration, drug problems, and driving under the influence in the United States, 1990 to 2014. And again, I'm going to say something here that's very controversial about some of these studies, but it needs to be said because I was reading through these studies, and then I read this other study that came from the Center for Immigration Studies, CIS. But the third study they're talking about in this article, I have that up, and I'm going to read the conclusion to you of that when we get down to it. Criminal immigrants in Texas, illegal immigration conviction and arrest rates for homicide, sexual assault, larceny, and other crimes. Now, what's important about this study, it's the only study that's out there that I could find where we have a state like Texas is one of the only states that folks can find that actually find out when they arrest somebody for a crime and they suspect them of being an illegal immigrant, they check their citizenship status. So in Texas now, that's a very good state to look at to see if the crimes increase. Now, the thing that is very controversial with my libertarian friends and others, and here it is. First, they broke a law getting here. Now, libertarians will say no, they didn't, or it's a victimless crime that they've crossed the border. It's still breaking the law. Me speeding down the road, and if I don't get caught, that's a victimless crime unless I get in an accident because of that speed. That's a victimless crime. Did I break the law? Well, yeah. I still broke the law doing a California stop at a 4-way stop sign or even a 2-way stop sign. Is that against the law? Yes. Some of you might be asking, what's a California stop? California stop, you roll up on the stop sign and you're looking both ways, especially if you're making a turn or going straight. Doesn't matter that you don't come to a complete stop, that you slow down enough you can see there's no danger and you just proceed on. When you come to a stop sign, the law says you must come to a full, complete stop. Now, was anybody hurt? Are you rolling through that stop sign? Well, no. Was there still a law broken? Yes. There was still a law broken. So that's the first one, that the law is broken. Second of all, let's go with the what ifs. What if we had our southern border locked down to the point where only maybe a handful of illegal immigrants made it through without any detection? Okay? Not in the numbers that they have in recent years. Let's say, especially over the past 9 years with this previous administration. And I'll even go back to the Bush and Clinton eras. All the illegal immigrants and the amount of them that came over our southern border. What happens if we choke that down to where, let's say just 0. Let's just round it off to a good even number, 0. None get across. If nobody makes it in this country illegal, or no one overstays their visa illegally and they're sent back home, they're rounded up and say, look, your visa's up, take you back to the airport, send you back to your country of origin. Let's say the immigration system's working the way it's supposed to. that laws are being enforced and stuff like that, there would be a zero increase in violent crime, period, as far as from illegal immigrants. Because if you don't have illegal immigrants coming into the country, you wouldn't have the violent crimes that are being caused by illegal immigrants. Okay, and again, they keep talking about these studies that the Cato Institute and other ones are actually going down through. Let me get down to this this bottom one. A third study by the Libertarian Cato Institute recently looked at criminality among undocumented immigrants just in Texas. The state records the immigration status of arrestees, creating a gold mine for criminologists. Okay, Cato found that in 2015, criminal conviction and arrest rates in Texas for undocumented immigrants were lower than those of native-born Americans for murder, sexual assault, and larceny. Finally, a research paper appearing in the current edition of the UK Journal of Migration Letters shows that youthful undocumented immigrants engage in less crime than do legal immigrants of U.S.-born peers. Now, again, they say less crime, but they're still committing crimes. And if they weren't here, that crime rate would be a lot lower, wouldn't it? It just makes common sense. All of this comes as no surprise to Art Acevedo, a police chief in Houston, which has one of the largest undocumented populations in the nation. The chief has been publicly critical of the immigration crackdown. There's no wave of crime being committed by the immigrant community, Acevedo said. As a matter of fact, a lot of the violent crime that we're dealing with is being committed by people that are born and raised right here in the United States. For decades, social science focused on the extent of crime committed by legal immigrants. These new studies are important because they're among the first to explore the link between crime and illegal immigration. The research proves that Acevedo and others suspected. Having worked around this community my entire professional career, which is about 32 years, I know that the vast majority of them that I have encountered are hardworking. They're here to earn an honest living, Acevedo said, but the new research may not move the needle in the immigration debate. Texas Republicans, for instance, have potent opinions about undocumented immigrants. I have no quarrel with anybody of any ethnicity, but I don't like criminals, and I think that not having people be citizens leads to criminality. Former LaGrange, Texas City Councilman Arnold Romberg says he's sitting on the courthouse square in Fayette County where voters went for Trump by a 4-to-1 margin. Ed Dykes, a local electrical engineer, says a crime committed by an undocumented immigration is one too many. And that's what I've been saying. If they're not here to begin with, they can't commit the crimes. And our crime rates would be lower, no matter what the percentage points are. It's actually immaterial whether they commit more crimes or not because they commit additional crimes, Dykes says. There are crimes that would not be committed. There are American citizens who would be alive today if unauthorized immigrants were not in the country. A recent poll showed that 7 out of 10 GOP voters in Texas support the proposition that all undocumented immigrants should be deported immediately regardless of whether they have committed a crime here or there. It just, folks, I know this shows a huge divide, but they broke a law to get into this country to begin with. They should be held accountable for that. That should go into the figuring of all this, shouldn't it? That should go into the figuring of all this. There are crimes that would not be committed if they were not here. It's as simple as that. No matter how many crimes it is, no matter what the percentage of it is on these other folks. It just, they wouldn't be here. And again, it amazes me, folks. It really amazes me how we get twisted around about this. How we really get twisted around about this. Now, I have this other, now this thing turns out to be this criminal immigrants in Texas, illegal immigration conviction and arrest rates for homicide, sexual assault, latency, and other crimes. That's about a 20-page report. And I just want to go down and share with you the conclusion of this report. It said the homicide conviction rate for illegal immigrants was 25% below that of native-born Americans in Texas in 2015. The conviction rates for illegal immigrants were 11.5% and 79% below that of native-born Americans for the crimes of sexual assault, larceny, respectfully, illegal immigrants are more likely to be convicted of gambling, kidnapping, smuggling, and vagrancy than natives. But those crimes constituted only 0.18% of all convictions that year in Texas. For all criminal convictions in Texas in 2015, illegal immigrants had a criminal conviction rate of 56% below that of native-born Americans. Legal immigrants had a criminal conviction rate 85% below that of native-born Americans. And again, I have to read through this whole study and look at a lot of things, and their numbers aren't wrong. There's a chart that they have here. Larceny conviction rates by immigrant status in 2015, native-born, illegal immigrants, all immigrants, and legal immigrants, okay? But if you look back down at where it says there in the conclusion there, that illegal immigrants were more likely to be convicted of gambling, okay, victimless crime, some people would say, kidnapping, smuggling. Kidnapping and smuggling, folks, they're horrendous crimes. Now, the things I did look through here and found out is they don't lump them in with the other serious crimes like homicide, sexual assault. Those are like an afterthought. But kidnapping and smuggling, for me, those are two big no-nos right behind homicide and sexual assault. Two big no-nos. And again, Cato Institute is a liberal think tank, and they don't believe in the border wall. They don't believe, or they believe we should open borders and stuff like that. So they have a slanted bias towards this whole thing. Now, let me show you this one first. Now, I'm not going to go through this one. The link will be in the show notes page at the danclementshow.com. Crime and the illegal alien, and it's really good. It's really good about this. It's a good PDF background. It's a long one, and it talks about some of the most violent criminals at large today are illegal aliens. Yet in cities where crimes from these lawbreakers is highest, the police cannot use the most obvious tool to apprehend them, their immigration status. In Los Angeles, for example, dozens of gang members from a ruthless Salvadoran prison gang have snuck back into town after having been deported for such crimes as murder, shootings, and drug trafficking. Police officers know who they are and know that their mere presence in the country is a felony. Yet should an LAPD officer arrest an illegal gangbanger for felonious reentry, it is the officer who will be treated as a criminal by his own department by violating the LAPD's rule against enforcing immigration law. Oh, that's where we're at, especially in these sanctuary cities. And sanctuary cities exist throughout the United States. California has become a sanctuary state. Now, there's a lot of cities in California that are fighting back against this, but this is what we're up against. So if you have a big city like Los Angeles that can't even rearrest these folks for felony reentry because they're deported for crimes that they weren't prosecuted for, the numbers are going to be skewed. They're absolutely going to be skewed. And so when you're looking at these things, you're looking at these reports, first look at who they're from, and second of all, dig into them. This is a big deal here about the LAPD. And the article goes on down through there and it talks more and more about this. And it just, it just irks me. And there's another one, there's another story in here that I'm going to link to, but I don't have it up here for us to read here. It's non-citizens committed a disproportionate share of federal crimes. Oh, I do have that one, excuse me. There was one, where was that other one I got? Hang on a second, folks. Let me look down through here. Illegal immigration is a crime is a article that talks about, and chronicles all these murders and assaults and stuff like that on American citizens by illegal immigrants from as far back as 2002. It's very lengthy. If you go to the link that has some other links up there for different years and stuff like that, but it goes through that. So that I won't be talking about that, but that's also in the show notes page. Illegal immigration is a crime. And it is. It's a federal crime, but yet, it's a victimless crime. But at least other crimes. It's a gateway crime, folks. That's what it is. and it leads to other crimes. And what do you mean it leads to other crimes? How is an illegal immigrant able to work legally in the United States if he or she does not steal an identity? And there's people out there profiting off of that. They're giving these folks papers that are illegal that they can use to get employment. And if they're not using the papers and the employers aren't verifying their citizenship, then the employers are breaking the law. Now, if there was no illegal immigrants coming in, the employers wouldn't be breaking the law. But they do break the law. There's laws being broken all over the place is what I'm talking about here. And this article here I want to talk to you about is the eye-opener here, I think, that puts the kibosh on these other studies. Non-citizens committed a disproportionate share of federal crimes, 2011 to 2016, by Stephen A. Camarota on January 10, 2018. Now, this is the Center for Immigration Studies. Okay, and I do have a couple. Again, I have that one article up there about that illegal immigration is a crime by the Federation for American Immigration Reform. Okay, 21% of those convicted of non-immigration crimes were non-citizens. 2.5 times higher than their share of the population. 21% of those convicted of non-immigration crimes were non-citizens. Almost a quarter of those convicted of non-immigration crimes were non-citizens. That's not an insignificant number, folks. These other studies don't put that out. These other studies, they try to hide things behind other statistics, which is just a ploy. Okay? Let me get down there. This one didn't, it's in my reader and it didn't come out real well in my reader. Many immigration advocates argue that immigrants have much lower crime rates than natives. And they put links in there. Go look these links up, folks. I love these articles that have these links so you can go and actually see what other people are saying about it. As my colleague Jessica Vaughn and I pointed out in a paper some years ago, however, the picture is far from clear. While there are other issues, the biggest problem with studying immigrant crime is that states and localities do not systematically track the country of birth, citizenship, or legal status of those arrested, convict, or incarcerated. But the federal government does track the citizenship of those it convicts. New data from the U.S. Sentencing Commission shows that of those convicted of federal crimes between 2011 and 2016, 44.2% were not U.S. citizens, 21.4% if immigration crimes are excluded. In comparison, non-citizens are 8.4% of the adult population. Of this, 8.4%, about 4% are illegal immigrants, and about 4% are legal immigrants. Okay? The Commission's data does not distinguish legal status among non-citizens. It's almost certain that a majority of the non-citizens convicted of federal crimes are illegal immigrants, but we cannot say for sure because the information is not provided. What we can say, at least at the federal level, is that non-citizens are more likely to commit crimes than citizens. A very important caveat about these numbers: those convicted at the federal level are not necessarily representative of all criminal convictions in the United States. Most law enforcement occurs at the state and local levels and is not responsible to simply extrapolate about immigrant criminality generally from the federal data. Nonetheless, federal law enforcement is still enormous, with 312,000 people, 67,000 non-citizens sentenced in the federal courts between 2011 and 2016, excluding immigration violations. And in the federal system where we do have a good data, non-citizens account for a disproportionate share of those who are sentenced for many different types of non-immigration crimes. And one additional caveat: because it is easier to make an immigration case, federal prosecutors sometimes charge illegal immigrants only with immigration violations, even when they have committed serious non-immigration crimes. Once convicted, an immigrant will still normally serve some time and then be deported, which is often seen by prosecutors as good enough. This, of course, does not happen with citizens. But because of this, conviction data on non-immigration crimes will tend to understate the level of criminal activity among non-citizens. Now, as I peruse those other reports, they don't put those caveats in there. And these are important caveats, folks. They really are. It's something we need to know. And again, It is amazing to me how many people want to jump through hoops. They want to jump through hoops now, mind you, to try to protect these folks, try to protect these illegal immigrants. And that was something, that additional caveat was something that I didn't even know, that I had not thought about before. That a lot of these prosecutors just want to get a conviction, and so it's easier to get an immigration conviction, have them serve some jail time, and then deport them, and let the more serious crimes go, and they count that as a win. So if that happens, of course nothing's going to be on the books about the more serious crime. What they need to go back to, and I know convictions are important, but I think they also need to go back to and see some of the original charges. Now, a lot of times these criminals aren't brought in on immigration charges. They're brought in on the more serious charges of homicide or sexual assault or kidnapping or smuggling. But then you have to go through the process of proving that. And it's real easy for prosecutors just to put it in immigration status, easier to prove that, make them serve some jail time and deport them. And yet the victims of these crimes get no justice. These crimes are underreported in the stats. And so then my libertarian friends get it wrong. And it does matter. I mean, it really does matter about the stats and about how things are happening. That's why I try to dig into these things and see if there's something, you know, because it didn't make any sense to me what my libertarian friends were telling me about crime. Then when you get digging into it, a lot of places, just to recap quick, a lot of jurisdictions do not report the immigration, they don't even look into immigration status. So we don't know. We just don't know. And I think states need to take care of that on their own. I think states need to make laws that if someone's convicted, if someone's charged with crime, whether it's, even if it's me, they should be checking my status as a citizen. Even me. And if they're found not to be a citizen, that needs to go in the books too. That they're arrested, they're non-citizen, they're arrested for these crimes. And put that as, even though they're not convicted of it, they're arrested, put that in the stats too so we can see those. And honestly, I believe if the people see those, I think prosecutors are less likely, because a lot of prosecutors and DAs are elected. A lot of times, if the people see that, they're going to be less likely to cut those plea deals for the lesser charge of immigration violation. And to me, I think that's important that we have the whole story. And most of the time, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to putting out the facts and looking at these studies, we don't get the whole story. And so then we go off half-cocked and we make these outlandish statements on social media that aren't true. We cite studies that are faulty to begin with because they don't look at the whole thing. And they don't tell you, they don't give you those caveats like I just did. So, folks, be suspicious of everything you hear, see, and read, and verify it. Read more, study more, look at more stuff until you get the whole picture. And once you get the whole picture, then you can make a better, you can make a more informed decision. A way more informed decision. Well, that's the music, folks. We're at the end of the show here, but fear not. We'll be back with you again on the next video. Definitely be back with you next Friday with the next episode of the Dan Clement Show on Free For All Friday. Again, may the 4th be with you. If you like these videos, you like what I'm doing here, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button so you know when I have new episodes out. Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Please leave a comment, you know, about the show. If you like the show or something I could be doing better, help me grow the channel by sharing my videos. And if you find it deep down in your heart, you help support the show, even if it's with $1 a month. It's $1 more than I had. Please go to my Patreon page and do that there, or go to PayPal and set up like a monthly donation of at least $1 a month. I'm pretty sure everybody can afford at least $1 a month to help me out here on the show. It's been the Dan Clement Show. I'm your host, Dan Clement, your constitutional warrior, fighting for the right just to be an American. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. We'll see you on the next video. God bless and have a great, blessed weekend.